the Forge After Dark edition. Let's get it fired up. Burned off my finger hairs. Starting on something new tonight. Gonna see if I can make a chef's knife over my next little while. Got my new piece of 1084 steel ready to go. We'll toss it in the forge and cut myself off. So here I am forging out the blade profile. I did not put in all of the footage of forging out this blade. I actually had a lot, but I realized after a while that you know, it gets a little boring if you just keep watching it. So I'm forging out the tang right now and getting that to the shape that I wanted. Overall, as you'll see in the end, I'm pretty pleased with how this knife turned out, and that of course starts with the forging. And I wanted to have more of a bigger section at the back of the tang for retention. That's what chef's knives tend to have. And then here I'm trying to straighten out the tang and the blade there at the spine. And there you got to see what happens when I drop the knife on the table. So I started, as you can see, I started on this knife before I got my new anvil, and then I finished it just recently, but I got diverted from working on this one because I was making those two swords for my friend, and I had a deadline for those. So now I'm drifting the holes in the tang because, as we've addressed, my drill bits and my drill won't go through. So here's the progress so far. I've about got the profile forged out. I think I'm about ready to quench. So I'll do that next time, and so far it's been a pretty productive and pretty fun night. And this one I prepped the handle scales for before I quenched it because I had to make a new quench tank, which you'll get to see later on in this video. I made my handle scales out of a piece of mesquite. And first I needed a flat side, which is what I'm doing here with my jigsaw. And then we go to the table saw to cut those into actual scales. Now, if you're watching this, if you're my middle school shop teacher and you're saying this isn't a very particularly safe way to use a table saw, you may be correct. But here we are. I did get those scales, and I didn't hurt myself like the last video when you saw me using the table saw much, so that's an improvement. Now I'm drilling the holes through the scales and testing my brass pins to make sure they fit. And now we're ready to quench. So first I'm doing a couple of rounds of thermocycling. I'm only showing one. Thermocycling means you bring it up to heat and then you let it get back down, and that fixes the grain structure in your, it helps to like regulate the grain structure, or like make it more straight, I guess. And now into the quench. As you saw, I'm just using canola oil. 1084 is supposed to quench just fine in canola oil, and I will say this knife did get hard, as we will see in a moment. And now we are grinding, and mostly I use this grinder to get the forge scale off. I did this one for one side, and then I used my angle grinder for the other side, but I didn't show that. And now using my beveling jig for the file. This is where I learned that I had definitely hardened it because I ended up having to use my grinder to put the bevels in. Now putting on the handle scales, and I actually made a mistake that I've made fun of guys on Forged in Fire for. I got which side was which mixed up, but I did again eventually get it straightened out. Got those scales on, clamped them in the vise, and then use C-clamps to clamp the ever-living crap out of the rest of it so that epoxy could dry. And that's what I'm doing here. And now we're shaping the handle. I used the belt grinder for the rough shaping, just an 80 grit belt on there to just get it down to the actual metal of the tang. And then as before, I've determined that I don't like using my belt grinder for the finer handle shaping because it tends to get away from me and gouge it. So I did switch to using a hand file and sandpaper, which, I don't know, there's just something satisfying about shaping a handle this way and starting off with a square block and ending up with a nice, smooth, and comfortable knife handle. And so I actually really enjoy doing it this way. It's pleasant and it's relaxing, I think, so enjoy watching me work on it. I am really pleased with how the Mesquite turned out on this handle. I think it turned out nicer than my previous Mesquite handles. And now we sharpen. So I'm trying a slightly different sharpening method. I was not as successful as I'd like to be. I'm not sure if it's because it's a massive knife and I just struggled to get the whole thing evenly or what, or if my methods just stink, but here we are. There's the finished product, and I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. I will talk to you guys next time.